Hi, it's Dargie here and welcome to 5-Minute Photography. It's lockdown, so I can't get out to make my usual location videos, so I thought I'd try and do something different. Wanted to break down photography learning into simple 5-minute chunks. If you're new to photography, I think this will be really helpful to you, or if you just need a refresher, I'm sure there's going to be something in these videos for you. So I've just come out for a walk this morning in my local sort of woodland area. This is just adjacent to my home. Sunrise, you can hear the birds singing and there's not a soul in sight. I'm as socially distant as a man can be. Before I get started, hit subscribe so that you get the new videos when they come up, and give me the old thumbs up, that really makes a difference too. Let's talk about aperture. Aperture is an opening inside the lens of the camera. Aperture means opening. The aperture is variable in size. A small opening lets in less light, and a larger opening lets in more light. We talk about aperture in f numbers or f stops. That just seems like a random bunch of numbers, but there is some kind of logic to it, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Aperture also controls depth of field. That's how much stuff is in focus. So if you're shooting something like a portrait or a close-up of a flower, you want to have the subject in focus and the background blurry. It's aperture setting. A wide aperture is what you need for that, a small f number. On the other hand, if you're shooting a landscape, you might want to have everything in focus from right in front of the camera all the way to the horizon. You need a high f number, a narrow aperture. So what you could do is set your camera to aperture priority. Start with your aperture setting at your lowest f number. That's the widest aperture. That will give you the shallowest depth of field. Take your shot and then cycle through the different aperture settings one at a time, all the way up to the highest f number. And then when you review those images, you can see the difference in depth of field as you go. You might not see a great difference between one setting and the next, but if you compare the photograph with your smallest f number and the highest f number, you're going to see a big difference between those two photos. That's a brilliant way to experiment with aperture and depth of field, and I recommend trying that if you're new to photography. So what aperture does is really quite straightforward. It lets light come in the camera and it controls depth of field, how much stuff is in focus. Where I think aperture gets a bit tricky is the terminology. We talk about f numbers, f stops, f/11, f/8, f/5.6. What does it all mean? It's a bit confusing, and the numbers don't seem to have much relation to each other. When you see an f-stop number written down, like f2, it should say f/2. F stands for focal length, slash is divided by 2. So if your focal length of your lens was, say, 20 millimeters, and your setting's f2, it's 20 divided by 2 gives you the diameter of the opening of the aperture. So 20 divided by 2 would be a 10 millimeter aperture. On the other hand, if your setting was f10, 20 divided by 10, the opening of the aperture is now only 2 millimeters wide, so it's much narrower. That lets less light in, obviously, but with a narrower aperture, the light that is coming into the camera, it's all coming in a straight line. In other words, it's all at the right focal length for the lens. When more rays of light are at the right focal length for the lens, more of them are in focus, and that's why you get a greater depth of field. It's the terminology that can be quite tricky. You've got a small number, lets in more light, but has less stuff in focus. High number, less light coming in, more stuff in focus. It's all a bit back to front to me. All I can say about that is stick with it. You'll get used to it. If you wanted to experiment with aperture, the easiest way to do it is to set your camera to aperture priority. If you're shooting a Nikon, that's A. If you're shooting a Canon, it's AV. In aperture priority mode, you tell the camera, okay, I want f5.6, and the camera will calculate the shutter speed automatically that you need to go with f5.6 for the scene you're looking at in that moment. So the camera is always reading the scene, knowing that you want f5.6, and filling in the shutter speed that you need automatically as you're shooting. Aperture also works alongside shutter speed and ISO to control exposure. That's how much light is in your photograph. I'll talk about that in another video, but between the aperture setting and the shutter speed setting and the ISO, you can balance your exposure meter to have a well exposed picture. I hope you took something away from this video. If you enjoyed it, hit subscribe so you can see the new videos as they come up, and give the video the old thumbs up. That would really be appreciated. Also check out my website where you can get my free ebook 3 Steps to Better Photographs. That's it for now. Stay safe, enjoy your photography. I'll see you out there.